We are taking you to Vuyo as we speak. Vuyo, good afternoon to you once again. And there is that latest information on the repatriation of soldiers. It is among the key topics that we have been discussing this afternoon that is likely to overshadow this particular State of the Nation address. What are you able to tell us from your vantage point?
Well, it's an issue that several political parties have raised today, that we do need clarity as a nation as to what exactly happened and what the government intends doing next. You may recall my last guest, who is the EFF's Secretary General, Marshal Dlamini, saying all they want is for those soldiers, or the remains of those soldiers, including, of course, those who have been injured, to be brought back to the country as soon as possible. If he was to have things his way, there would not be a parade here later today. That's been the sentiment throughout the day. We will hear, of course, what the President will have to say later on in his State of the Nation address. Things are moving here. MPs and other dignitaries are being dropped off by buses not too far, less than 100 meters from where I am. So there is a great deal of movement, which then signals that we're inching closer and closer to that 7 o'clock when the President delivers his State of the Nation address. We continue, of course, to canvass opinions of people who are in one way or the other directly or are going to be directly impacted by the speech that will be delivered later today. And one of those people is, of course, the chairperson of the Public Service Commission, Dr. Somadoda Fikeni, who joins me now. One of the priorities of the government of national unity, we've been told, is the building of an ethical, capable, responsive state, part of which is, of course, your responsibility.
That in itself carries over from the 6th administration into the 7th administration, after realization that you could have the best policies, you could mobilize resources. But if you don't recognize that state capacity, which rests largely with the public service, is the engine of anything you want to drive. You want to implement policy, you need that. You want to fight corruption, you need that. You want investors to find an environment that is predictable, you need that. You need service delivery, you need that. So that in itself, I think, should be seen as an enabler that should be there in all administrations to make sure that you are able to realize your dreams.
We've been canvassing not only the views, but insights, from the relevant ministers, because they would have been part of the cabinet lekhotla, they would have been part of the cabinet meeting that preceded the cabinet lekhotla. But throughout the year, from May, June, they would have been part of conversations where not only priorities were discussed, but how to execute, how to act on those priorities would have been discussed. Are you any privy to any decisions that may just be announced today that would be far-reaching, certainly from where you sit in your corner in public administration?
I wouldn't know what is in the speech of President, but I do know that it is close to him as it is close to his government of national unity and the cabinet, the issue of professionalization of public service. And I doubt at any stage that they would drop the ball and focus on other things, because ultimately, whatever you promise, do you have technical capability? Do you have the competence of public servants to do that? It is mainly on daily basis, not a minister, not a parliamentarian, not the judiciary, who deals with the people on the ground. It's public servants, frontline staff members, and back office members who process papers, who service people on a daily basis. That's where the capacity is needed. All developmental state, all developed state are known to have that capacity to implement policies to service the citizens.
Speaking of possible diversions, a sentiment has been expressed throughout the day. And of course, I mean, it's an area you are very, geopolitics and everything that goes with that is an area you are very familiar with, even though these days you wear a different hat. But there's a very real fear. It's palpable. Everyone was spoken to, irrespective of whether they are on the GNU side, of politics in parliament, or on the so-called progressive part. There's a very realistic fear that this particular speech may be diverted in one direction or the other by issues such as geopolitics, what the comments made by Trump, U.S. President Donald Trump and his cabinet ministers, but also the President Ramaphosa signing off on the expropriation bill, but also other issues that people on either side have actually raised. Do you see that happening today?
There's no way the president would avoid the geopolitical developments on a global scale in the African continent. The advent of Donald Trump, for example, is a force of life in a major power. And it is beginning to be a major player, in a sense, disrupting some of the conventions which have been there. So you cannot not take that into account. But equally, you wouldn't go into a counter-punching in these sensitive situations when South Africa has to be working with the U.S. in handling the transition of the presidency of the G20. Same with the DRC situation, sensitive as it is as an inflectious point. When the peacemaking process, the wheels are beginning to move, one of the people who are engaged in a dialogue there has to stand down and use the available diplomatic channels to deal with the issues, because no foreign policy becomes a beauty contest of who scored more in the social media. Ultimately, it has its protocols, it's grounded on certain realities, and that in itself is very important, but at the same time, it cannot avoid presenting things and putting them into context.
After all, State of the Nation addresses are all-encompassing and usually get into virtually every aspect of political life. Thank you very much, Dr. Fikeni, for your time. Really appreciate it.